Hi all, this is Skate, and this is the Tier 9 Chinese tank destroyer, the WZ-111G fake tank. I bloody love it. I'm not 100% crew in this video. These are two masteries back to back, and we're running around 87% crew. When you are fully equipped, fully consumabled up, which I am in this video, but not fully crewed up, you are running around a 15.17 second reload. You'll have slightly better traverse, and you will have better top speed than I have in this video. In this video, I have around a 16-second reload, and I don't know what the traverse figures are, but they're lower than what they should be. But I thought I would make a video on this tank, and then probably make another one when I am fully equipped up. I haven't finished the grind on this tank yet. I have now got 100% crew in it, and I really like this tank. I said in one of my previous videos that this line gets better and better the higher up the line you go. I enjoyed the tier 8 more than tier 7, and I am really enjoying this tier 9. It is like a big, angry ISU 152 on steroids. The gun mantlet is godly, and the front armour is more than sufficient and capable. And it has that monster gun. And because of that, you can play this thing long range, and if you have to play it close range, you can play it close range. Strangely enough, I actually think the armor profiling on this performs worst at medium range. And I know that sounds a bit strange when I just said you can play it long range or close range. And the reason for that being is because of that monstrous gun mantlet. It consumes a large front portion of the tank, and it's tapered off to the right, which means you can hide the left-hand side when you're playing longer range, and just expose the front right-hand side. Makes you an incredibly tough target to penetrate. At medium range, if you're exposed, it's easier to hit those spots. And the logic would be at close range, it's even easier to hit those spots, but it's not, because of the size on that gun mantlet. When you go in real close, you face hug, and when you face hug with a mantlet that big, you will see everybody aiming for the left hand side of this tank. They'll be pointing to the right, and all you've got to do is wiggle, and the amount of people that will accidentally hit the gun mantlet is unreal, and you will end up with some ridiculous bounces as a result. Especially if the tank is the same height or lower than you. You just end up producing so many bounces from being really close range and with that mantlet stuck in someone's face. Obviously when you're trying to get close to them, you need to wiggle left right as much as you can, because then that will stop them penetrating like that. When you're pointing directly at something, that gun mantlet is, like I said, virtually impenetrable. I haven't been penetrated once through that gun mantlet. And to be fair, it's 270mm thick with 200mm of armour behind it. There's pretty much nothing in the game which can go through that, and that's not even taking into consideration effective thickness. The front, on the other hand, is 200mm thick. There is plenty that can go through that. Effective thickness when you're on the ground, straight flat, is around 250, which is very sufficient, and when using the gun depression, you start to go up to 300mm, which makes it very tough. Those cheeks are a potential issue, because although you can see they're very well angled, they're only 80mm thick. Now when you're pointing directly flat at something, those cheeks are around 300+mm thick when you're pointing directly at something. As soon as you angle slightly away, the effective thickness massively drops off. As an example, use the full gun arc, that will go down to 226mm effective thickness. Easy pen all day long. And obviously the more you start to turn, the easier it gets to pen. So they're a concern, but they're also an opportunity for baiting. If you're pointing at something and you find yourself with no cover, you can just wiggle left and right, and you will, well, if you're doing it right, there's a potential chance of increasing a bounce in. The other problem is they may just wait until you wiggle a little bit too much one way, and you massively reduce the thickness on the cheek. And then, of course, as is standard with 90% of tanks, the lower plate is ridiculously weak and an easy pen, and so are the track wheels. So in this sort of scenario there, lower plate's hidden, track wheels are hidden, it's just a big dirty gun mantlet and one very well angled cheek to shoot at. Thankfully no one was shooting at me anyway, but if they were, it would have been a hard target. So the armour has got better again, but obviously the negative of that is the mobility's got worse again, which, as mentioned in my previous video on the tier 8, you have got to make sure you have got hard cover next to you with this tank, because if you get circled, you're screwed. And you've got some tanks like a Jaeger. If a medium comes up close to you, tries to circle you, and you've got hard cover next to you, they can't exactly push you out of the way. In fact, when someone's trying to circle you in one of them things, if you've got hard covers, they'll go for the side, and you can just squeeze them off, basically. You cannot do that in one of these. If you try and do that in one of these, you'll really struggle. It doesn't have the engine power and the weight to pry off mediums who are literally stuck to the side of you. And that's pretty frustrating. And you'll know what I mean with the Jaeger. If you've tried to squeeze at one of them and they're next to a rock, they will literally squeeze you like a little spot and push you back in front of their big gun. In one of these, you just can't do that. So even if you're looking to manipulate and take advantage of one of these and you're in a medium tank, that's one good way of doing it, because they just don't have the weight to push you off. So hard cover, absolute necessity. The other thing to remember with hard cover as well is, as we've already mentioned, that massive gun mantlet is tapered off to the right, which means you can easily poke out from the right hand side of buildings, making you a harder target, because all the left hand side, which is a bigger, easier shot, is not exposed. If you're swinging out from the left hand side of a building, you're literally exposing all that weak armor, or weaker armor, than the gun mantlet. If you're poking out the right hand side of a building, you've just got a great big gun mantlet with a couple of weak spots around it. It's a very challenging tank in that circumstance. And I think, like a moron, I've recorded this entire replay with the tank names column open at the top. I've only just realised that when I've sat down to record this. And now I'm wondering whether I should go back and just redo the recording. But I don't even think I have this recording anymore, so I can't. Screw it. I'm just going to carry on. But for anyone else who is annoyed by that, sorry. It's annoyed me as well. So we're going to change the topic. We're going to move on to the gun. First thing, penetration value. It has 290mm of penetration with the AP. That is a very, very respectable figure for a tier 9. In fact, it's the highest penetration value of any tier 9 tank destroyer. The Object 704 obviously comes in just behind it with 286mm of penetration. In other words, it doesn't matter what tier you're playing at. If you're top tier or bottom tier, you're really not going to struggle penetrating a lot. Which means, thankfully, you don't really have to change to the heat ammunition too much. If you do end up having a change because you're against a well-angled IS-7 or something to that effect, heat 375mm, you're not really going to struggle in any shape or form. Also, something worth noting, it has a 12-degree gun arc either way. That's also important to consider when it comes to the armour, because when you're poking around the right hand side of a building, if you're using that full 12 degrees of gun arc, well, basically, it means you're in a circumstance where your armour is even more effectively angled. And then another note, obviously you've got 6 degrees of gun depression, which isn't anything to write home about, but it does the job. I don't really have a lot of bad things to say about this tank. I've really enjoyed playing it, and on top of enjoying playing it, yes, it's got a slow traverse, the side armour is absolute poop, but you know what? That's easily negated by keeping hard cover next to you. If you're in an ISU 152, you get spotted, you get absolutely obliterated. Mostly because everybody wants to take an ISU 152 out as quick as they can, and the armour is easy to overmatch and and deal with it, basically. It's not the case for this tank. If something's pointing at you frontally, they have to aim, they can't just click. Which means they're waiting around longer, which means more chance of you getting a shell into them as well. So it's not a really difficult tank to do well in. That doesn't mean every single game is going to be a mastery and everything's going to be really high damage, but when you work with your team, I know, bear with me, it's a rarity. When you work with your team, you can push the front line with your heavies, and you can feel confident doing that. and they know they have a 640 alpha shot right behind them, waiting to support them. And even if they don't and they're completely oblivious, it allows you to play the team player man and be there supporting. And those shots, very regular, will make a difference. Even if you do 1,000 damage, 2,000 damage, being on the front line with this thing, helping make the push, can make the difference between a win or sitting at the back and ending up losing because you're not making your gun effective throughout. With an ISU, it's harder to do that because of how easy the armor is to contend with. With one of these things, yes, I'm not saying you can't snipe in it, I'm not saying you can't play the longer range game in it, especially when you're up against tier 10s, and there's a lot of big dirty tank destroyers out there. But when you see the front line pushing, and you are making a push, or your team's making the push, you need to go with them, you can't just wait. Because again, those 640 alpha shots really do help push that line back and make people back off. Like I said earlier on, I think this is a great tank, and I think it's quite user-friendly and easy to work with the armor. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.